Hello and welcome to Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike.
This is episode 209, and Mike, we just turned the recording odometer over by a couple of digits. We just crossed 1,200 recordings after last episode.
That's amazing, but that's still not as many CDs as I have. My brother's going to be horrified to hear that.
You've got multiples of that number over there, I think.
Right, yeah, probably. No, I do. Absolutely, I do. Being modest.
Still putting them away on the shelves after your move, I guess.
Yeah, now I have all these boxes around. I had to stop because now he went back to work. So I don't have any time to put them away. I come home and I'm just listening to music for the podcast. So it's like, I guess you could say work all the time.
You need like elf helpers there to put all those things on the shelves.
Yeah, but I wouldn't like that because then they'd be filing the discs away in places I don't want them. So this is something I definitely have to do.
Don't get in between Mike and the order of his recordings.
Yeah, or my books. Actually, they could put the books away. I might allow that.
Before we get into any new things, I've got a lot of thanks and some other things to talk about. First of all, thanks to lutenist Miguel Rincon for sharing our episode from last week, in which we discussed his recording Concertos for Baroque Lute that was on the Aparte label.
He wrote a really nice message to us, actually, on Facebook, and I was... Thanks for his kindness, too. He was appreciative that we appreciated his art, which I really liked hearing. So thank you, Miguel Rincon, for writing to us.
Yeah, get in touch whenever you have a new lute recording coming out. We both like the sound of that instrument.
Yeah, we don't hear enough of them, even though there are quite a few recordings out there, but, you know.
Also, thanks to Christian Pabst for sharing our episode as well. We discussed his recording, Rhythm Riot. Right. Piano trio that had some great playing and some interesting tunes with Japanese references in the titles. And I was curious, so we had a few email exchanges, and it turns out that the one tune title, Mount Rakan, which is famous for a Zen temple, so I thought that might be what it was referring to. It's actually from a Yukio Mishima science fiction novel.
Oh, wow.
The Beautiful Star, or Utsukushi Hoshi, and the Kimnara, the heavenly Buddhist music figures we mentioned, they're kind of half human, half birds flying through the air. Perhaps thought that that matched his impression of the sound of that tune, which I thought was really interesting. It's always kind of fascinating to hear the inspiration for song titles and the tunes themselves.
Yeah, now in fact that you said that, now I want to go back and hear that tune again. So
Yeah, that was a really good recording. Go back and check that out if you haven't heard it. And also thanks to friend of the podcast, organist Brian Ho, for sharing the episode as well. He wrote to us and said that he has been friends with organist Mitch Town ever since Town hooked him up with an organ for a gig back in 2014 when he was playing in Omaha with Calvin Keys.
Oh, wow. Another guitarist that we talked about once.
Yeah, he passed away, but we talked about one of his recordings.
Yeah, I've got that record, too. I really liked it.
That was good.
Got it on a CD.
So be sure, if you haven't heard last week's episode, to also check out Mitch Town's Refuge. Yeah, a really interesting recording with some great original tunes on there as well. And we're going to roll into some new music this week, 6 recordings as always. And in the episode description, you'll find, as always, links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings we'll discuss. Also at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. Now, if anyone wonders, why do these guys use Deezer? Well, I'll tell you the reason why. Because Deezer was the first CD quality streaming music available in Japan.
Yep, and we're still using them.
Still using it. That's right. Although there are other alternatives now. One thing I will tell you about Deezer, after going through and getting links from all the major streaming services for all of the recordings that I sampled last year, that's more than 1,000. I can say that Deezer has the best searching functions compared to all the other ones.
I have to say, we started using them and they were giving us a lot of trouble, but they seem to have straightened out over the years. It's really good now. You know, I've never not found a record on there, or things just come up more easily. There used to be tracks missing. Now that's no problem. It's all, they figured stuff out. Let's just say that.
After searching for more than 1,000 albums over 5 different platforms, right, I found out all the quirks and weird things about all of the different streaming services. They all have a little bit of an annoyance here or there, but Deezer, after all, in comparison, is pretty good.
And they just have that high quality sound that we like too, so that's really important to us.
Now, if you can't see, the full description or the recording list and the links that we put up to all the streaming services are hard to access. Wherever you're listening to us, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, podbean.com. Everything's easy to follow there for this and all previous episodes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you like listening to us, and tell a music-loving friend as well. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music categories, in the podcasts, in the recommendations. That helps us grow our audience. Also, come follow us on our Facebook page to get extra info and some new releases at the end of the week. Usually I put them up. I put some up on Friday. You can leave a message or a comment there. You can check us out on X. I put up links to the new episodes there as well. Our ID there is Adult Music Pod. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We're going to play music samples in this episode as we talk through these albums, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available in the streaming services in the links provided. We also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs like Mike and I, or high-quality downloads, because that helps support the artists.
Yeah. Oh, before we get into the music, you and I are old enough to remember like programming computers when they were just those green print on the black screen. We had to do this in school. And I'm just wondering, talking about streaming services, Spotify's font or whatever it is, it's green on black. And I'm wondering if that's like a reference to those early days of computers. If anyone out there knows, write to us and let us know. I'm just curious.
It's interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I find it annoying to look at. It's kind of why I don't really use Spotify, because it just reminds you of those horrible days trying to figure out how to program a computer. It was horrible.
Syntax error and all those kind of messages.
Error, yeah. I know some tech guys here in Japan, and they said that you don't even have to find those syntax errors anymore, that AI finds it for you.
Huh.
So it's all become much easier. So it was all a big waste of time. All right, let's get into the music. Now, our first album tonight from the Baroque era is really a fantastic record. It's called Vox Feminae, and it's by an ensemble we've heard before on the podcast, Les Kapsber'girls.
Yeah, no sheep this time, though.
Yeah, no sheep. I'll explain why Russ said that in just a minute. Anyway, Les Kapsber'girls are Alice Dupont-Percier, soprano, Axel Werner, mezzo-soprano, Garance Boiseau, bass viol, Pernell Marzorati, triple harp, and Alban Ims Tiorbino, baroque guitar, and she's also the director. So it's an all-women ensemble, 2 vocalists and instrumentalists. Now, they're named after Hieronymus Kapsber'gir, some of whose works we'll hear on this album, and who they say is their first great musical love. Yeah, in fact, he was the subject of their very first album, which wasn't on the Alpha label. Oh, I didn't mention, this is on the Alpha label. Just want to put that on. Kapsber'gir was a lute virtuoso and outstanding composer, and I kind of like the way the ensemble named themselves after Kapsber'gir. Like, you know, Taylor Swift's fans are called Swifties, and these fangirls of Hieronymus Kapsber'gir have called themselves the Kapsber'girls.
That's cute.
It's such a weird classical thing, trying to make... This is kind of what we're trying to do on this podcast, is kind of try to make this music cool, if that's possible for someone over 50 to do. I think there's not anything cool about being over 50.
At least make it not pretentious, yeah.
Yeah, not pretentious. That's what we're really trying to do. Okay, so we heard the Kapsber'girls before on an episode 47, Baroque and Brass, on January 24th, 2022, on their album Vous avez dit brunette, with a question mark at the end. It's an album of pastoral songs that featured straight-on photos of 4 sheep on the cover in a Zoom meeting-like 4-window arrangement. We liked the album, which also had like sounds of actual sheep in between the tracks. In fact, Russ refers to this ensemble as the Sheep Girls, but I'm thinking this is going to have to change after this album. We'll have to see, because that made an impression on us. You know, I liked their sense of humor, and that comes across on this album too. We do get to see the Kapsber'girls on the cover of this album, and they're much more attractive than the sheep were.
From our perspective.
Yeah. This album features vocal works by women composers and instrumental works by the ensemble's namesake Hieronymus Kapsber'gir sprinkled throughout. The Kapsber'gir works are taken from his collection Balli, Gagliarde e Correnti, published in 1615. All right, we start with really probably the greatest female composer of the Baroque era. Do I have to say women composer now? Anyway, Barbara Strozzi, whose music really needs to be better known. I mean, it's gotten quite a lot of outings on records like this, but I don't think anybody's ever made, or there have been very few recordings of her works solely. I know that Cecilia Bartoli recorded her a bit and really introduced her to the general public. So we're starting to hear a lot of her songs now. The first song is called Sonetto Proemio dell'opera Mercé di Voi. Let's just hear a sample of this, because I want you to hear this ensemble before I say anything. Here we go.
Mercé di voi, mia fortunata, di voi, mia fortunata, stella, di più, fra i
You know, one of the things that really drew me into this recording, you hear it right away, and you heard it in that sample. You had that upward sort of staccato scale. Ha 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 ha. I can't even do it because I don't sing. But anyway, the thing about that is it's not just a scale here. It's got character. It's almost like a laugh, or it's almost like a sort of, you know, laugh, or just a little sort of laugh up to the next note. So it's got some sort of emotion in it. It's not just sort of a figure. And we're going to hear that all over this album. These women really characterize these songs well. All right, so the vocal ensemble come in harmoniously here. Nice floating tone painting on the word volo. In fact, when we heard that volo, that's what they're saying when they do that upward scale. So they're flying. They're taking off from the ground. Cool, huh?
Yeah.
The recording has remarkable clarity, allowing the listener to hear each individual voice clearly in the harmony. I like the vocalists Alice Duport-Percier and Axel Werner's approach with pronunciation too. Each syllable comes across clearly, and this particular work has a lot of moods juxtaposed among each other in succeeding sections. So in that way, it's kind of like a prototypical Baroque work. You'll have various emotions, and it'll just keep changing mood. The Baroque era people had a real fascination with emotion. The theorbo playing of Alban Ims does a lot to set the mood by setting the various tempos. It tends to slow down more and more toward the middle until bursting out with a more vibrant tempo and bright harmony at the end. Strozzi takes us into a lot of emotional areas. As for the text by Giulio Strozzi, it's hard to say what it's about exactly, but I'll interpret it as showing through images the feeling of being in love. So it's giving you images of what it feels like to be in love, just in case you've never been in love before, which is possible, I guess. Track 2, Antonia Bembo, In amor ci vuol ardir. The opening features Baroque guitar playing from Alban Ims, and this is another great feature of the album. The continuo, the playing of Alban Ims, changes instrument from time to time. So the feeling is always different, or the sound is always changing on each track, and this really keeps the ear entertained. The song itself sounds Spanish, it's Italian, but the triple harp of Pernell Maturati adds a lot of character. This track has a lively rhythm and features only soprano Alice Duport-Percier, I think. I wasn't always able to place which singer was which in these solos because they go into various ranges, but this is a solo vocal work, and I'm going to sample this. It's very short. It's 1 minute 46 seconds, so I'm going to get it kind of midway until the very end. Now, one thing I noticed about this recording, so I heard this on speakers too, and I heard a lot of like deep bass. And what it is I guess the singer is kind of not touching the microphone, but maybe stomping the floor where the microphone is standing, and you hear a lot of that kind of interference all through the album, really. I heard it a lot, so. But it just puts across a bit of excitement, I think. You kind of hear the excitement of the singers, like, and they're throwing themselves completely into these tracks. I really liked the entire sound of this. Oh, another thing I want to kind of say to the Alpha label, some of these tracks are solo vocals, and it would be nice to know which singer, according to the notes, is actually singing on the tracks. I had to guess, and I couldn't always tell. I guess they wanted to focus on the ensemble, like they're a unit, and they don't want any one or two people to stand out, but it would just be nice to know on the solo vocal works which of the two singers is singing.
Yeah, definitely.
Track 3, Antonia Bembo, Amor mio, facciam la pace. My love, let's make peace. This is a song in which the vocalists offer to make peace with their lover and worship love itself. That's what they did in the Baroque era, I guess. I guess now you make peace and you sort of, clean the house or something. I don't know. The two vocalists give the vocals a playful quality that really makes the lines and subject of the text come alive. I find myself engaging more with music with some characterization of the text, and this ensemble excels at that. The entire feel of the piece is highly Italianate. I especially like mezzo-soprano Axel Verne's operatic recitative-like characterizations of her solo vocal moments. I'll sample these sorts of things later on the recording. I'm going to go to the next track now. Listen to that one yourself. Track 4 is Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Corrente Quinta, so this is going to be an instrumental track. Let's just hear a bit of it. These are all a little different, and I rather like that about them too. The instrumentation keeps changing. Even here, there's a real life to the rhythm. It really jumps out of the recording. It features the harp, Pernell Mazzurati playing, in the lead with the bass viol, Garance Boiseau playing pizzicato, and I think there's also I guess it's a theorbo in there. That's what I kind of thought I heard, but I'm not really sure. So the three instrumentalists are playing on this one. Track 5, Barbara Strozzi again, Canto de bella bocca, che dolce udire. What a great language Italian is. A song of the beautiful mouth, how beautiful it is to hear. This is much like the first piece we heard by Strozzi, with sudden shifts in mood and some gorgeous harmonizing by Dupont-Percier and Werner. Though it needs to be said, Strozzi is writing to illustrate the text, so despite the changes of mood that are characteristic of her, all of those moods are different in this piece, varying according to the text. Axel Werner gives a more personable quality to her vocal line that really stands out for me and makes the performance more endearing. Alice Dupont-Percier engages in a bit of this playfulness too. The mouth of the title is being praised for singing songs of love. I also love the sudden change to only triple harp in the accompaniment at the beginning of the 4th minute. I'm being struck by the affinity this ensemble has with this composer. Track 6, Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Corrente Quarta, another instrumental work for harp and bass viol. And also, I guess there's a theorbo on here too. The bass viol, by the way, in these instrumental tracks is always played pizzicato. This one is lighter than the first, acting to frame the Strozzi work. It's a bright-sounding work with a pretty melody that lightens the heart. Track 7, Isabella Leonarda, Ad arma, o spiritus, to arms, o spirit. So here we get a harder attack, and we get something a little more military, and this was kind of cool too in a playful way. Let's hear the opening. Yeah, fantastic characterization there, too. The words are repeated often, and they're never sung the same way twice. Listen carefully, you'll hear. The text is in Latin here, and the hardness of the opening is contrasted with the lighter intervening sections, lightened by the harp taking over the accompaniment. It's an engaging song, particularly in this well-thought-out performance. Track 8, Barbara Strozzi again, Che si può fare? What can one do? This starts slowly, and I'll guess on the turbino. The vocal performance is gorgeous and smooth. I'll guess this is mezzo-soprano Axel Werner. She brings a bit of gravity to the anxious text, lamenting her cruel fate as disasters rain down from the heavens. It sounds like my life. Again, there's a slight operatic, dramatic quality to the vocals, and I'm going to start this sample well into the recording at around the 2-minute and 30-second mark.
Si può dire così va gli onesti insorti tiranna l'innocenti condanna cos'è loro più fede.
Yeah, actually, that may well be the soprano. I can't really tell. I got to hear her in her lower end to know from the color of the voice, but up there, it's hard to tell. I think that's the soprano now that I hear it again, Alice Dupont-Percier. She's bringing a lot of operatic feeling into this song. Oh, martyr. You know, those little accents there, they really add a lot. You're not just singing the notes, you're characterizing the words as well. Now, this is the last Barbara Strozzi composition we'll hear on the album, and it's pretty epic. The piece makes an emotional arch, growing in feeling until at the very end we're back where we started, at the lighter sadness and the accepting of the lament we heard at the opening. Track 9, Francesca Campana, Voi Luci Altere. Both vocalists are back in this composition. The text is anonymous, but written from a masculine point of view about how the woman's features are seducing him. From 1 minute and 41 seconds, the work takes on a dancing quality and allows some moments where the women both sing roulades in harmony. This has gorgeous ensemble, and it's an appealing work. It's really funny you have a female composer writing from a masculine point of view about a woman's features, and then you have two female vocalists singing it. I don't know what to make of this. It does sound masculine in its text, though. She didn't write the text, though. We don't know who did. Track 10, Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Gagliarda Quarta. I like a nice Galliard, so I'm going to sample this. It's really an Italian dance, or was popular in Italy anyway. Let's hear it. Really pretty. And also notice the pizzicato bass viol again. That's an interpretation. That's not necessarily in the score like that. And they do that in every instrumental track. This piece really lightens the mood after the heavy Barbara Strozzi work that we heard previously. The harp makes the work come across with grace, and we can also hear the Baroque guitar in this, I believe. Track 11, Francesca Caccini, a composer I really like. C'amor sia nudo. This is accompanied appealingly by Baroque guitar and is sung by one vocalist. I'm going to guess this is mezzo Axel Werner. Let's see if I change my mind when I hear this sample too. There are her characteristic teasing attacks on certain words. I promised you I'd sample this, and here we go. Especially in those verse-ending lines like "e vanità," it is all vanity. Let's hear a little bit of this.
Che fra mortali e che fra cor celesti vincersi vuole e non giammai saresti e vanità ma come può
Vanita. It's really nice the way she characterizes that. Track 12, Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Ballo Secondo. This is kind of a halting dance featuring the three instrumentalists. It kind of stops and starts. It's a little slower than the others. And then we go to track 13, Francesca Campana again, Fanciulla Vezzosa, charming young lady. This starts a cappella, but then it's accompanied by only a Baroque guitar, so it comes across as really intimate. Let me sample the beginning of this one.
Fanciulla vezzosa, dimmi perché ti mostri sdegnosa e sprezzi mia fe, se pur l'amor del mio cor, che tu sei la fiamma che il petto mi infiamma. Credilo a me, io amo sol te, non essere ritrosa, fanciulla vezzosa, fanciulla vezzosa, fanciulla vezzosa, fanciulla vezzosa.
Yeah, I like the sound of the strumming guitar in this sort of music.
Adds some excitement, yeah.
I like the subtle ways these tracks vary from each other via the instrumentation, too. The guitar is often strummed in this track. The piece has a lively rhythm, and the two vocalists sing with high spirits. I like the characterization here, again, of a man trying to win the heart of a woman, as being a bit exasperated. The vocalist is exasperated at trying to win this woman's heart. Listen for that quality in the performance. Track 14, Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Corrente Prima. This dance is much like the previous track. The instruments have a muted quality here, playing quietly but with a pointed rhythm. I like the overall sound. Track 15, Antonia Bembo, Abbi pietà di me. Have pity on me. The music matches the sentiment, sounding like a lamenting theorbo is accompanying soloist mezzo-soprano Axel Werner. Here she's in the lower mezzo range. A sharper attack at around the 2-minute mark introduces a new section, and throughout the album, as here, I've been impressed by Werner's characterization of the text she's singing, occasionally going beyond tone to express herself via breaths and almost spoken sounds. The piece is slow and quiet in its lament. I'm not going to sample that because we're going to hear a bunch of laments next week, so I'll save them for then. Track 16, Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Ballo Terzo. A contrast to the previous track, this one is a sprightly dance on 3 solo instruments. And this is a Baroque guitar for Alban Ims here. Let's hear the opening of this. You could almost miss the bass viol on these pieces because it's playing pizzicato and you might mistake it for the harp because that's what a harp does. It would sound sort of like that, but it's in there. Track 17, Francesca Campana, Amor se questa sera. The two vocalists come in harmony. After the first verse, the voices scatter, and again we hear characterization via teasing tones, and I just love this quality about this ensemble, so let's hear it here. I haven't sampled enough of this quality. And some great instrumentals there too. The piece features the entire ensemble of 5 performers, with the instrumentalist playing prettily and with a light, cheerful touch. Track 18, Ercole Pasquini. Well, that's a man, so that we know this is an instrumental work. Toccata Prima. The toccata features the solo theorbo, so a solo track for director Alban Ims. Let's hear her. Now that could be a tiorbino. I really don't know. Which is a small theorbo, so I really don't know from that range what it is. I really wish the booklet notes had told us. We get to hear Ims's sensitive artistry on the upper part of the instrument. The instrument sounds harp-like at times, but I'm guessing it's all her. It's a pretty piece, and there's some sensitive playing here. Track 19, Lucia Quinciani, Udite lagrimosi spiriti d'Averno. This is the last time on this album we're going to hear the vocalists, so let's sample this one. Yeah, those resolves kind of are done much in the style of Monteverdi. At least that's how I think of them. There's some nice chromaticism in that too, which always kind of signifies a lament in music like this. The vocal line here is spacious, and I think this is Axel Werner again. Here the singer complains that her lover is crueler than hell itself. People do exaggerate when they're in love, don't they? It's a brief track. Track 20, we get an instrumental by Hieronymus Kapsber'girls, Gagliarda Sesta. The program ends with an upbeat, tasteful dance with an appealing melody. It kind of sounds like something should come after this once the brief piece is over, but that's the end of the album. This is a fun album to listen to and rewarding in the musical riches it gives us. The Kapsber'girls aren't like most ensembles. The vocalists have a unique style and sound that draws the ear and makes them identifiable from other ensembles. Perhaps it's the fact that we're hearing two vocalists only, but it's also the characterization they give the words they're singing, and the overall lightness of the approach. There's a sense of genuine enjoyment of their craft and of the songs. They've put together a highly appealing program here, which they themselves do a lot to make more enjoyable still. This album is genuinely uplifting to the spirit, and it had me wondering what it was like to really live in the time these pieces were composed, and for me, that's a good sign, so it actually took me back in time. By the way, I want to say I see a full album of Barbara Strozzi's music in Le Kapsber'girls' future, and this is an ensemble that's going to be on my list of new albums to wait for.
Yeah, I thought this was really enjoyable too. I enjoyed the variety of the types of compositions. The lyrical content was interesting to follow along in the booklet, in translation, of course, for me, but I found it amusing and interesting. The vocal arrangements were varied too, and I particularly liked the movement of the vocal lines in the Strozzi pieces, as you pointed out. The sparse instrumentation is charming and subtle in accompaniment, and then the instrumental works break up the program nicely and draw you in with interesting soft tones, and the recording is up close. You can hear everything really carefully. And when the voices are on top of the instrumentation, as I said, the spatial nature of the recording makes you feel like it's spreading out right in front of you. So I enjoyed that first with speakers, but then listening to it again now in headphones, it also fills out and sounds really good. So you have great sonics and a fine program, and these voices are really enjoyable.
Yeah, and songs like this, I have to use translations usually too. I mean, I know individual words, but the way the sentences are structured, it's kind of like a Baroque era poetry sort of thing. Yeah. So you have to really kind of break it all down and say, okay, where's the where's the subject of this line? So our next album is Les Étoiles Invisibles, 19th century French music for flute and piano by women composers. So we've got a women thing going tonight. That's more women here. This is performed by the Baldo-Corona Duo, which features Davide Baldo on the flute and Chiara Corona on the piano. And it's released by Da Vinci Classics, our good friends at Da Vinci Classics. Yeah. Read the article on them in the recent Fanfare magazine. This was released on April 11th. The booklet notes for this go into a rather interesting discussion of the gender of instruments, claiming, and I think accurately, that instruments like the tuba have always traditionally been played overwhelmingly by men, and for women the harp has become a typical instrument, though in the past it was played by men and women equally. Amateur piano players in the 19th century were mostly female, although professional concert pianists were men or women, indifferently. The notes then go on to make the point that these gendered qualities tend to be expressed in the music written for that instrument as well, and this is where this got my attention, which in turn causes a particular affinity between male or female players and that repertoire. You see what's happening here? We kind of just build all this, gender stuff up in the actual history of music by this happening. The flute tends to be a feminine instrument, and many female composers wrote for it in the 19th and 20th centuries. And it leaves it at that it's feminine, but I want to add that French composers in general tend to have a real affinity with the flute's timbre. And I love French music for the flute particularly, and all of the composers on this album are French, as well as being women. The first is a pretty famous one that we've covered numerous times on this podcast, Lily Boulanger, Du Matin de Printemps, or In a Morning in Spring. This starts with urgent piano chords quickly repeated and an equally urgent scurrying flute line. The ensemble here is of a piece and comes across well. The duo gives this work a lot of energy, and in fact, that's going to be a characteristic of this recording. It's got good energy to it. Let's hear the opening, and you'll see what I mean. I really like Davide Baldo's flute tone, not just for its urgency, but just for its it's got a sort of edge to it, which is something you don't really hear much on the flute. You hear it in jazz flute a bit, but he doesn't have that beautiful, rounded, like Emmanuel Pahud type tone. It's a little different, and it's attractive to me, I guess, from my, love of, jazz and popular music in general. It just sounds a little edgy, let's say. And I think it really does a lot to bring this work to life, the urgency of the work to life. Chiara Corona especially shows some virtuosity in her lines and brings a sense of drama that Davide Baldo also projects in the flute part. This is a pretty complex piece with a lot of diversions from the opening material in its relatively short time. There are short, calm, and melodic interludes in between the busyness. The flute rather excitingly winds up in the highest range at the end, with the piano remaining energetic to the climax. Track 2. Cécile Chaminade, Serenade aux Étoiles, Opus 142. Here the piano has a tolling bass note and a pleasant phrase to play before the flute comes in and repeats it. The piano and flute trade the melody between themselves in a clever and appealing way. Both piano and flute are in their high end in the first minute for a tension-tightening section, and that's the section I want to sample. This is a highly appealing piece that should be taken up by professionals and amateurs alike. Track 3, Mel Bonis, Air Vaudois, Opus 108. Let's just give a sample of this right away. Yeah, and the gorgeous melodies just keep coming on this album. This is another really catchy one.
That one sounds like it has a bit of Debussy influence in it. Yeah, really pretty.
Yeah, the opening features a chiming, cheerful piano line. The flute comes in with the melody. One thing that's catching my attention is how much the piano has to do in all of the works we've heard so far. And that's no different here. Corona carries the melody at times and trades it with the flute. This piece is upbeat and also has many appealing melodic qualities. The main theme could be from a folk song for its singability. I should also mention that all of these works are giving Davide Baldo quite a workout on the flute. He plays actively throughout the 3 works we've heard so far. Track 4, Louise Farranc, Venez dans la prairie, troisième rondoletto sur la chansonnette d'Olive. So all of these pieces have come in energetically. This one has an almost operatic introduction to the tune, which is heard about the 15-second mark, the tune that is. This is another lively track with the piano taking on more material than you would expect. Let's give a listen. It keeps up its energy throughout, even in the detours from the main theme, which returns at the end. It has a good, florid ending. Track 5, Louise and Aristide Farranc. Variations concertantes, Variation concertante pour flûte et piano sur la tyrolienne de Madame Gaël, celui qui sut toucher mon cœur, Opus 22, the one who knows how to touch my heart. This starts with trills played in unison by the 2 instruments. It's an operatic aria opening. At the 30-second mark, we hear the theme that will be subjected to the variations. The theme has a pretty and rather standard romantic aria shape to it, and that's the part I'm going to sample. Yeah, charming, but the whole piece doesn't go like that. The first variation takes it into completely different, busier, more active direction. Nothing of the romantic here. After a pause, the second variation comes in grandly, more at a maestoso tempo. It's more melodic than a display of figuration. The third variation goes for a lighter overall tone, with a floating feel to the melodic line. The flute is in a high register, and the piano accompanies both lightly and with very busy figuration. The fourth and final variation is rapid, with busy piano lines supporting the more modest flute melody. This leads to a grand build-up to the end. Track 6, Louise Bertin, Le Loup-Garou, opéra comique, in one act. This is the overture, which is arranged for the piano with flute or violin. Now, a loup-garou is a werewolf.
The werewolf, yeah.
Yeah. It's a comic opera. It's not a horror opera, so I'm kind of wondering what this is like. Anyway, rumbling bass in the piano introduces a histrionic, stormy opening. The piece moves forward slowly with the piano controlling most of the line. There's a heaviness and weariness to the rhythm and to the pushing forward quality of the flute line. A new section follows, more rambling and allegro. The rhythm has a galloping quality. The work sort of moves like a Rossini overture from section to section, each within contrast of those surrounding it. Let's hear it a little bit. This sounds a little spooky, I think. In the sample, we heard a switch from the galloping section to something more dramatic. There are some charming sudden changes in the work, and for me, that's where the appeal lies, in the surprises as to what's coming next. Bertin has some good operatic tricks up her sleeve. Here, I like Chiara Corona's shaping of her mostly chordal lines. She supports the flute line with energetic playing. Tracks 7 through 9, Augusta Olmes, Trois Petites Pièces. The first one, track 7, is called Chanson. This has the piano arpeggio strumming like a guitar or a harp. The flute plays repeating phrases over that. It's a brief but very attractive piece with a lot of melodic content in it. Yeah, some great chord changes in that pattern.
Yeah, I really like that one.
That's what really struck me was the harmony. Track 8, the second movement, Clair de Lune, not the Debussy one. Clair de Lune is just moonlight, and there are loads of pieces called Clair de Lune. This has a descending piano line supporting a sustained flute note. The piano sounds mysterious here, creeping downward while the flute melodizes. The piano gets a solo part at 1 minute and 13 seconds, constantly playing chords that are descending, and it's a pretty piece. Track 9, the third and final petite pièce, is Gigue. This has a galloping quality to it. I think when I said galloping, I was thinking of a hobby horse because it's kind of like got a back and forth sort of feeling to it, you know. The movement's very brief with an ABA form, the final A form featuring very quick flute roulades added to that staccato melody that we just heard. Tracks 10 through 14, Clémence de Grandval, Suite pour flûte et piano. Track 10 is the first movement, Prelude. This has a gorgeous, shimmering opening on the piano with the flute lifting into a higher range from the piano's line. It's very nice. Let's hear it. This also has an appealing song-like theme to it. The piano's shimmering line continues throughout the movement. Track 11, the second movement, Scherzo. The opening piano line has a light dance quality to it. It introduces most of the material at the beginning with the flute decorating. It's cheerful. The flute is very busy on this almost 6-minute movement, dancing, playing trills while providing chords for accompaniment and taking over the melody at times. The middle section of the piece is more lyrical than the opening, yet contains hints of the opening theme that will return in the 4th minute, and I'll let you sample this movement. Track 12 is the third movement, Menuet. Starts with a unison piano line that the flute repeats and builds on. It's a pretty pastoral opening, and let's sample this. very melodic and immediately appealing. Dynamics come into the picture as the piano suddenly goes to a very loud theme at the 1 minute mark, contrasting with the quieter flute themes that follow. This happens again at the 2 minute mark, the piano playing a big lumbering line that the flute gently responds to. Gorgeous sound on the flute from Davide Baldo on this track. He's got a great feel for the melody and what it requires. Track 13, the fourth movement, Romance. This has a 3/4 piano opening with a bass note and 2 chords, pretty standard. The flute floats a melody above that. The piano's line starts intermingling and completing the flute's line after a while. This is a calm, flowing movement. It's very beautiful. At 1 minute and 30 seconds, we get some contrast as the piano starts that faster staccato line that you just heard. The flute eventually plays shorter phrases over that. The flute and piano have to play a unison at about the 2 minute and 30 second mark, and this shows off the precision of the duo. The flute then takes a wavering line as accompaniment as the piano gets a chance to play the theme. The piece ends calmly. And then track 14, Finale, the final movement of this 5-movement work. This is one charming movement after another in this suite. The finale fits in with this pattern perfectly, starting with a quicker but highly melodic theme. The tempo is on the fast side here. The piece sounds like it's in a hurry to get somewhere, but there's a liveliness to this briskness. The piano interrupts to introduce an interlude, then we're back to what is effectively a rondo theme, though it doesn't repeat with the same figuration. The piano interrupts again with grand chords, the flute chirping above it. The theme comes back sounding even lighter, its melody now passed between the flute and piano. The theme is heard one last time at the end, and the piece comes to a lively, cheerful ending. So this album is full of works that feature highly appealing melodies. All of them are singable, and both members of the Baldo-Corona Duo have a deep sense of melody and make these works shine. Davide Baldo isn't one of those flautists with a highly cushioned tone, yet the tone still comes across as appealing, and he makes his playing sound urgent throughout. Meanwhile, Chiara Corona carries a lot of the positive energy projected from these works. She's given pretty busy lines by the composers on this album, and she characterizes them all well, particularly when there's an attractive melody. The program is well prepared, and the recording went by quickly.
Yeah, I enjoyed the enthusiastic performances and the range of musical expression by the Baldo-Corona Duo on this recording. The French have always seemed to compose so well for the flute. I think it's, as you mentioned, the sensitivity to timbre. And these female composers are no exception, and all the melodies in the compositions are really enjoyable right at a first listen. We've heard Uli Boulanger's music a few times on the podcast, and in her composition here, the harmonies caught my ear right away. As I mentioned, the Bonis reminded me of Debussy a bit. I don't know if it was just in the air at that time and after. And Holmé's first movement on the chanson, that was really intriguing. It was simple, but it had this folk song kind of melody to it, and then it was infused with this really creative harmony, and I really enjoyed that piece. It just called out to me when that came along. A really interesting program all over, and as I said, the performances really bring out the best in the music.
Yeah, works worth discovering and probably even taking up if you happen to be a flautist or a pianist. Okay, our contemporary composer of the week is a composer we've heard before on the podcast, Roberto Sierra. His chamber and piano music, performed by Continuum, Cheryl Seltzer, and Joel Sachs directors. This is on the Naxos label, released on April 11th. Now, Russ and I were both introduced to the music of Roberto Sierra on our episode 121, A Trans-Musical Experience, July 3rd, 2023, when we talked about an album of Sierra's orchestral works featuring his 6th Symphony, played by the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Domingo Hindoyan on the Onyx label. It wound up being one of our best albums of 2023. So I was eager to hear this album of chamber music on Naxos, and it turns out that Sierra's music is well represented on recordings, with the Naxos label releasing a lot of his works under the American Classics series. Continuum now have a long history with the music of Roberto Sierra. It began at a concert at the University of Puerto Rico, which is where Sierra is from, in 1983, where Sierra was working in the concert office. It's kind of a nice gig there. You can move from the concert office to being a composer. Continuum have been premiering and recording numerous Sierra recordings since then. The folklore and popular music of the Caribbean have been a driving force in Roberto Sierra's music since his student years in Europe, and we certainly heard that on his album of orchestral works, which is really what appealed to us about it. Sierra became convinced, when he was in Europe, that the survival of Latin American art depended upon the preservation of the roots and essence of its cultural identity. Sierra, like Bartók, doesn't quote traditional material, but assimilates that material into his personal style. Sierra is a composer that continuously reinvents himself, and he certainly does that here.
Yeah.
There are 32 tracks on this album, so I'm going to sample selectively. Most of the movements are around 1 minute long, and you can just go to the internet and sample them for yourself. Tracks 1 through 6 intervening periods of time from 2019, featuring Moran Katz, clarinet, Stephanie Griffin, viola, Joel Sachs, piano. This work explores the question of whether music is marking time, going along with the clock, or is music transforming time, creating new regions of temporal space? Something I've often wondered about, by the way, because I've noticed that if you listen to a big classical movement, it seems to go by faster, even if it's longer, than a shorter, denser piece, so time sort of gets manipulated, or our perception of it. Musical materials unite each intervening movement, but the individual movement's moods and gestures separate them. A single 9-note scale in its manifold pitch combinations are recycled throughout the work. The outer elements of each miniature changes its temporality and the perception of the work's singular and unifying pitch structure. Now, if you're hearing words like pitch structure and you're saying, oh boy, this is going to be a real modernist work, you are correct. Now, track 1, the first of these periods of time, Rapido, is very brief, but it's got some great use of the winds. They're kind of squeaky sounding in this, so I kind of liked this right away for that quality. Let's hear the opening. Yeah, angular sort of, melodies there, but I liked the timbres, like the honks and squeaks of the various, especially wind instruments there. It kind of sounds like a mid-20th century work in a way. Track 2 is number 2, Lento. This starts with the piano and a long, drawn-out clarinet tone. There's some reedy timbral manipulation, and I especially like the clarinet in this movement. It plays in all its ranges, and the clarinet really is capable of a lot of different sounds. Number 3, Veloz. Viola starts with a scratching sound, and again, the timbres of the various instruments are pushed into unusual territories. The ensemble has a lively sense of this music, and it comes across with energy and enthusiasm. This is a clean recording, too. Number 4, Preciso. The viola plays pizzicato while the clarinet and piano establish a quick, swaying rhythm. Let's sample this. Sierra doesn't want to use the instruments in their traditional timbres in any of these works, I think, and I really like that quality. I love the clarity of the recording. It's very dry sounding too, and I think that just kind of makes these sounds come out a little more dramatically. The spacing of the instruments too is really great. They're each given their own space, so if they each sound clearly, this piece gets into some rhythm briefly at the end before descending downwards and quickly cutting off. Track 5, number 5, Moderato. Double-stopped viola chords drawn out, as well as pizzicati. The clarinet plays at the low, reedy end of the instrument. There's a final piano note that decays to end the movement. And then number 6, Furioso. A quick, urgent pace is given to this final movement, the longest in the set at just over 2 minutes. It lightens up a bit in the middle, but always comes back to its furious opening pace. Okay, so interesting, aggressive rhythm and some compelling tones in there. The movement and piece, really, altogether, ends with a quick crash. Tracks 7 through 13, Piezas Cortas, or short pieces, from 2018, featuring Joel Sachs on solo piano. This was written for Cheryl Seltzer, so why isn't she playing them? I mean, she's on the album. That seems strange to me. Maybe she is playing them, but the notes say it's Joel Sachs. Anyway, that's what I'm going by. These works and the ones in Piezas Intimas, which we'll hear later, belong to several cycles of miniatures entitled simply Pieces. They've got simple ideas and are a kind of sound journal of where Sierra's imagination took his fingers on a particular day, so they're improvisations of a sort. Track 7, number 1, has a mechanical staccato piano sounding like it hasn't been wound up completely. Let's hear that. Now, this is some pretty remarkable playing because those two rhythms are kind of out of sync. I've heard Thelonious Monk do things like this too. And it's just amazing because the two hands are playing this rhythm. It doesn't really fit together between the two hands. So amazing there from Joel Sachs. Track 8, number 2, has hazy chords at the opening in this more mysterious piece. Sudden accented patterns leap out of the texture, then the hazy chords continue. They bring the brief movement to an end. Track 9, number 3, is under 1 minute long. It's played at a quick staccato. It's got a tricky rhythm with pauses built into the bass line. Chords occasionally sound in the upper end and are accented, and it ends quietly. Track 10, number 4, is another brief piece at under 1 minute. There's a chord outburst, then spacious meditative chords with a hazy harmony to them. Occasional sharp accents leap out. Track 11, number 5. Complex set of rhythms at the opening of this brief, quick piece, which also features chordal accents at odd places. Track 12 is Piezas Cortas number 6, and it starts with a quiet piano melody. Let's hear this. It just started getting fascinating. I really should have just started from that point, but the piece is almost over at this point, so I got out of it. We started hearing those quickly changing rhythms in the right hand, so it's a difficult piece, but very interesting. Track 13, number 7, the final of the Piezas Cortas. A quick staccato theme opens the movement. Axis in the right hand, pull out melodic elements. It's pretty abstract and very short. The entire work ends inconclusively. Tracks 14 to 17, Sonata for Violin and Piano from 2010. This features René Jolis on violin, Joel Sachs on piano. This is a part of a series of compositions for solo instruments, chamber ensembles, and orchestra in which Sierra has re-examined the concept of sonata form. So track 14 is the first movement. Sierra has said this is based loosely on a Mahlerian model, so Gustav Mahler. Rather than exploring thematic material in relationships regulated by tonal areas, which is what a sonata normally does, this sonata unfolds with themes that resemble more the characters in a novel. They enter the narrative and follow their own development and path as a character in a novel would do. This starts with some shimmering piano and a violin tone that's a bit disembodied, playing lightly in the high end. This work has an actual melody, the first traditional one we've heard on the album. So let's hear it. A pretty mysterious opening. There's a nice creeping piano line with pizzicati on the upbeats, playing a bit syncopated. The naturalness with which all of this is played makes the piece register with great character. The material morphs and shifts into different sections. The narrative quality is easy to follow, the character subtly changing moment to moment. The violin has some appealing lines throughout the movement. At the end, the piano accompanies with figures in the high end, and it's got a satisfying, quiet ending. Track 15, the second movement, Rapido, starts with sprinkles of high notes on the piano and a pizzicato violin line, followed by a line played sul ponticello. Again, notice the quick changes of character in the violin line, while the piano keeps the same character. Okay, I take that back. The piano changes a lot too. I guess I just wasn't focusing on it when I heard this the first time. The violin gets some subtly played double stop lines in a freely floating pattern, leading back to pizzicati, then to sought-out double stops. There's a lot packed into this under 3-minute movement. Track 16, third movement, Con Gran Expresión, reminiscent of an ancient folk tune that is used in a narrative manner associated with a literary work that invites the listener to go beyond the written text. The piano plays tolling notes and the violin comes in with a gauzy, muted tone. The movement presents some intriguing tones from the violin and appealing patterns on the piano. Again, the violin's style is mercurial, quickly changing from one sound and pattern to another. Here legato, there pizzicato, elsewhere sul ponticello, and at the 3-minute and 9-second mark there's a glassy harmonic line drawn out of the instrument. Let's start from around that point with that glassy harmonic line. Track 17, the final movement, ritmico. The rhythm is of a truncated clave, or rhythmic pattern, pointing to its Caribbean essence. The dance rhythm is syncopated and heard in both violin and piano, sometimes handing off and sometimes with the piano accompanying while the rhythm is in the violin. The rhythm has a stop and start quality to it. The rhythm gets ironed out at 1 minute and 30 seconds and after, where the piano plays a straight arpeggiated pattern that the violin melodizes over. The dance rhythm is already back by 2 minutes and 24 seconds though. It's kind of abstract here, sounding broken up on the piano. The straightforward piano patterns return as the violin moves upward and ends on a harsh harmony. It then starts with some figuration and plays until the end, along with the piano's figuration. They come out together on the final chord. This turned out to be a pretty complex movement. Tracks 18 through 25, Piezas Intimas, Joel Sachs on the piano, and this was written for Joel Sachs. Intimate here adheres to the original Spanish meaning, which means coming from within, from the interior of my soul, not the commonly accepted meaning of coziness or being quiet. Track 18, number 1 of the Piezas Intimas, Lento. This is pretty abstract. Miscellaneous notes from the piano drift in space. The tempo is slow, and a bass note pins it all down, creating harmonics above via the damper pedal. This sounds kind of spacey to me. Track 19, number 2, Veloz. Quick staccato patterns. One starts with an ostinato and breaks away, moving into the high end of the piano. It's a hard piece to pin down verbally. It's short, but has a lot of changes, always reverting back to staccato lines. Track 20, number 3, Ritmico. Syncopated rhythm here, and I rather liked the opening of this one, so I'm going to sample that. Yeah, this is almost getting into like Schoenberg territory the way it moves, but it's not. It's not a 12-tone piece. The piece quickly moves into a section with a lot of space and more widely spaced playing in syncopated rhythm. It kind of sounds like a study in juxtaposing rhythmic patterns. Track 21, number 4, Brillante, starts with glissandos on the keyboard. Crashing chords come in to disrupt any patterns that might develop. 22, number 5, Veloz. Rapid staccato patterns start this off, and let's hear a bit of those. Yeah, some pretty impressive fingers on Mr. Joel Sachs there, huh? The texture remains this way throughout, without any anchoring until the music suddenly drops to a bass note at the 43-second mark. It then rises up the keyboard and ends. Track 23, number 6, Misterioso. Murky harmony and inconclusive patterns make this movement's title obvious. It's pretty spacious, allowing the mystery to spread. Track 24, number 7, Lento. Another mysterious pattern, rather appealing, but suddenly interrupted by loud chords. I decided to pull this one out and sample it too. You get the idea. The piece builds on this opening, moving up into the high end of the piano for some sprinkled patterns before ending mysteriously in the mid-range. And track 25, Vivo. This is a staccato rhythmic work, and I don't think I've been playing too much of Sierra's rhythm on this, so I wanted to play this one. And like that piece we heard earlier, this is playing two out-of-sync rhythms. It's the same person. I've never figured out how to do that. It's pretty amazing to hear when you have total separation of the hands like that. I found the polyrhythms here interesting at the opening. The piece breaks into various multi-rhythmic patterns, sometimes snapping together in sections with the right hand playing in the stratospheric end of the piano, which is where the movement ends. Tracks 26 through 28, Sonata number 1 for viola and piano, features Stephanie Griffin on viola and Cheryl Seltzer on piano. This was written in 2016. In this work, the three movements represent the three sections of a sonata: exposition, development, recapitulation. So the whole thing is like one giant sonata. Sort of like Franz Liszt's piano sonata, but much shorter. Track 26, first movement, Ser, marked lento and then rapido. Ser is being. The four notes at the beginning are the primary motif of the whole work. Chords and a savage bowing of a single note on the viola are heard. Griffin has the viola making a hoarse, throaty sound at the opening. It's kind of a disturbing opening, and I was rather intrigued by it. Let's hear it. You know, I'm hearing this in headphones now because I heard this through the speakers, and now I'm hearing it on headphones for the first time. I didn't notice those thin viola harmonics sounding while the piano was playing. Really cool. The viola's patterns then speed up, and it goes through many articulations: pizzicato, quickly bowed staccato, and long-toned legato playing, dropping into trills. The viola's tone straightens out as the movement goes on, sounding more beautiful and rounded. Still, there are some harsh sounds in this movement, and Stephanie Griffin puts them across with some force. I like the light harmonic arpeggio at the 2-minute and 30-second mark. The movement after this is mostly characterized by a weird, dotted rocking horse rhythm. It gets brutal again after that, but I like the calm ending. It's an intriguing movement. Track 27, Devenir, Becoming, marked lento. This develops like a fantasy with abrupt fluctuations of contrasting delicate and energetic gestures. This starts with harmonics in the viola, then it goes into its low, distinctive end, playing glissandos in that range in an almost comically vulgar way. Yeah, it just keeps going with intriguing idea after intriguing idea. The viola goes through its entire repertory of effects in this particular movement, and we get brief pizzicato here, too. The glissandi from the beginning are back by 1 minute and 41 seconds, with very low piano tones rumbling beneath. I liked the use of the piano in this movement, which has Cheryl Seltzer playing in the very deep-sounding low end, a timbre we don't normally hear. Track 28, Memoria. This is the third movement, marked Rapido. Latin rhythms are introduced, montuno-like, known from the rumba. Music from previous movements is also recalled. The rhythm here is pretty intriguing, set as it is by non-percussive instruments. Well, I guess the piano is percussive, but I mean traditional Latin percussion. As you heard, it quickly disappears in favor of a build-up by the viola into a higher range. The viola goes into a melodic section with glissandos connecting notes from 1 minute and 40 seconds or so. The piece continues, sometimes melodically with patterns constantly changing, until a reach into the high end of the viola leads to a harmonic that ends the piece. The timbres in this 3-movement work were very interesting. And finally, tracks 29 through 32, Fuego de Ángel, 2011, features Renee Jolles on violin, Stephanie Griffin on viola, Christina Reiko Cooper on cello, and Joel Sachs piano. This was inspired by a place in New Mexico that triggered Sierra's imagination despite his never having visited it. The idea of an angel acting in conjunction with fire evokes images from Renaissance and early Baroque religious paintings, especially some of the early Latin American colonial works that, in fantastic and unusual ways, depict celestial battles between good and evil, such as many representations of the Archangel Michael defeating the devil. Track 29, El Ángel y las Sombras, moderato pero muy expresivo, explores the instrument's high and low registers. There's a gauzy tone to the strings at the opening of the work. High string instruments come in with pointed brief phrases, and the piano plays up in the high end. The piece has a kind of smooth, calm surface with spiky interjections from the strings. Things get excitable by the second minute, where the strings keep playing. There's a kind of conflict feel about all of this. Let's hear the string part. That is a pretty busy section of music. The conflict quietens down by the end, where we're back to the beginning pattern of calm backdrop with sawed-out pointy lines and some rough timbres. The piece ends on a sustained, quiet note. Track 30, the second movement, Misteriosa Danza, Danzante, depicts a ritual dance, perhaps one that an angel might perform before confronting an enemy. The cello starts with an ostinato pattern, but changing harmonies. He reverts to staccato as the piano takes over his line. High strings add atmosphere. Textures change quickly in this work. There's a lot of metamorphosis of material into new patterns. I thought this aggressive strings section was interesting. Let's hear this. The movement is marked danzante, but this is some vigorous dancing. The movement ends with a high piano pattern eventually evaporating after the strings play their last fading lines. Track 31. 31? Man! Is the third movement La Visión del Ángel Expresivo. a reflection of the inner world of the angel, one which is profoundly inspired by love, but at the same time is inscrutable and does not relate to earthly feelings. I like the way Roberto Sierra thinks when he sort of thinks these things out. And then he'll try to put it into music. Really amazing. This starts with an ominous piano line that reaches a trill. Carefully placed pizzicati accent the light piano line. The violin plays sul ponticello. The cello comes in the first minute with a slowly moving sustained line, while there's lighter piano and pizzicato violin activity around it, and interesting contrast too. High piano notes are dripped onto the texture, featuring piano bass notes and pizzicato violin in the second minute. Then a slowly climbing line in all instruments emerges in the third minute. The timbres magically smooth out in the fourth minute to something more positive. Then we hear pizzicato in the violin, sul ponticello on the viola, and a low sustained note in the cello to bring the movement to an end. Track 32, the final track on the album, is the fourth movement, Fuego con ritmo y pasión. It has a highly rhythmic opening, and over the rhythm set by the piano and cello, the violin plays a melodic line. Yeah, some interesting little rhythmic details in there if you listen closely. The rhythm changes and the work goes on, but some kind of rhythm is always there, mostly maintained by the piano. It's a pretty intriguing movement with its constantly changing textures over frequently reorchestrated rhythmic patterns. The work ends on a final accented chord. This album presents a side of Roberto Sierra that we didn't hear on the album of his orchestral works. It's more abstract and modernist, and actually pretty exciting too. We get excellent dedicated performances of all of the works from Continuum on this recording. The works aren't as straightforward as the ones we heard on the Orchestral Works album, and really sound like they're by a different composer at times, but it's the singular use of rhythm that connects the two recordings. It's not as easy a listen as the Orchestral Works recording, though. The work that intrigued me most here was the Viola Sonata, which exploits the odd timbres the viola is capable of. I'm very attracted to timbral manipulation, and for that reason I prefer the multi-instrumental works to the solo piano pieces, which came across as very abstract and demanding for the pianist, not for physical difficulty, but for keeping all of the rhythm in line. And in fact, it was those kind of two-handed, out-of-sync rhythms that really intrigued me on those pieces too. This is an album for the adventurous and sheds new light on Sierra's varied compositional style. He's very much a composer of the late 20th and early 21st century.
You know, I picked that recording of his orchestral works as one of my favorite classical recordings, and I wouldn't have guessed it's the same composer.
Right.
But I guess we find out more about his different stages of development and concept from this recording of chamber music. It's completely different. The one thing that strikes me as a common point in all of his compositions is the rhythmic energy. It seems to drive everything along. And then, as you pointed out, throughout all the different works, there are different interesting uses of timbre that catch your ear, particularly in the strings. Well, the violin and viola sonatas are more melodic in nature. I won't come away singing any of the melodies, but they were interesting. It's all quite interesting. There are constant changes, too. Sharp corners being taken at all points with new ideas. He seems to have constant ideas flowing, and he knows where to go with lots of ideas throughout. So you have to take a break once in a while after a piece and just analyze what you heard. Yeah, I'd say I still personally prefer the orchestral works, but this was pretty interesting in concept. And yeah, I'd like to hear some of those other recordings. I think there's a whole series of them on the Naxos label of his works by these performers. So be worth checking out.
He's composed a lot of music, and if you look for his music on CD, there's plenty of them now. This album was an hour and 13 minutes long, and I definitely didn't listen to the whole thing straight through. It really should be separated into the various works when you listen to it.
All right, over on the jazz side, we're going to have an international tour as usual, and we're going to start out in France with guitarist Romain Pilon and his recording Open Roads on the Jazz and People label that came out April 11th. Born and raised in Grenoble, France, Pilon first studied with local teachers, and then in 1998, he received a scholarship to study at Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts. We heard him way back in episode 81, Summer Strummin'. That was from September of 2022 on a recording called Finding Light. The leader was bassist Jeff Denson, and it also had Brian Blade. That was Ridgeway Records. About his playing on that record, I looked back and I had written, Pilon's playing is fine throughout. He can be bluesy one minute and enigmatic the next. And I like the subtle different tones and textures he matches to the mood of each moment. In 2022, he also had a release of his own as a leader called Falling Grace. Here, we've got Romain Pilon on guitar and all original compositions, Orlando Le Fleming on bass, Mark Whitfield Jr. on drums, and we heard him recently with trumpeter Thomas Marriott. And we've got some guests on half the tracks, Jean-Paul Estevenard on trumpet, he's Belgian, and Alexis Valet on the vibes. And we discussed his Explorers recording way back in episode 48. There are no recording or engineering credits on the Bandcamp site information, but the notes say, quote, evolving between the adventurous spirit of the Blue Note albums of the Grand Epoch and a more contemporary ECM-type sound showing the influence of Pat Metheny and Kenny Wheeler alike, Open Roads unveils a series of sensitive, poetic, lyrical, and groovy tracks, unfolding a wide palette of emotions and colors under the fingers of a guitarist whose reputation is well established. Why not join him on the roads? Unquote. Well, let's do it. Let's go for a ride, starting out with the title track, Open Roads. It starts with the quintet format here. Le Fleming sets the pace and the solemn mood with a repeating, ringing open fifth of a D and A for 4 measures. Whitfield adds light drum decoration. Vibes and trumpet take the lyrical melody together, leaving Pilon to softer chords. The evolving melody section is 24 measures, but the line ends sooner, leaving Pilon's chords hanging to a pause. Let's hear this recording get started. And after the pause that's coming up, the ringing bass is back to get Estevenard going on a trumpet solo. He explores chromatically and mixes his lines up with more staccato ideas, really ringing in the reverb and working way up high. There's another pause, and then Pilon restarts with solo guitar. The others join in with new vibe and trumpet lines that continue on under some guitar improvisations. Let's check out some of that. tone and a relaxed feel. After the guitar solo, the vibes and trumpet work to a transition of the bass open fifth returning and a soft vibes and guitar ending. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of an ECM vibe from this opening tune here.
Yeah, I know that vibe well.
Track 2, Long Story Short. This feels like it's in a fast 4 with Whitfield getting some nice popcorn-like snare accents. The structure's interesting. It seems to be an 11-measure intro, then an 11-measure melody line of vibes and guitar. That phrase repeats with trumpet in a longer 16-measure section, and both sections go around again. And then LeFleming continues on with solo bass modulating into a new final busy section. Let's check it out into the bass interlude. It's going in a direction you don't know where it's going to land. Pretty interesting. Valet is up first for a vibes solo over busy bass and Whitfield's pressurized drum fills. It really grooves along with chords from Pilon. Let's hear a little bit of that as well. Is off from there on a solo. I like his thick, spacey tone and fluid lines. After that searing guitar solo, they take it one time through the first melody sections and the solo bass section to the tricky part to end it. Track 3 is 30 Years After. Down to a trio format here. This is a slow and very intimate ballad. There's an 8-measure intro, and the melody has what seems to be a repeating first 8-measure section, but it comes to an anticipation-building pause. Listen to the subtleties of tone that Pilon gets in his playing with differentiation of soft-stroked chords and then pearly ringing notes. nice. LaFlemme gets a bass solo here with a pleading sense. Let's hear some of his playing. Pilon has melodic and relaxed improvised lines and a pause back into the pearly notes in the final melody section. It's very dreamy. Track 4 is ready for Kooky or Kooky, C-O-O-K-Y. This is a happy tune that gets really swinging with the full quintet, a vibes and trumpet melody starting with a 19-measure section that comes around again into a contrasting final section with a tag that sets up Estevanart and Valet for solo exchanges. Let's continue on and hear some of those trumpet and vibes exchanges. They keep feeding off from each other's ideas and building intensity. Pilon gets a solo that's really smooth, but with interesting rhythmic figures, and trumpet and vibes are back from the final section of the melody to the ending. It's a very energetic tune. Track 5, Good People, back to the trio format, a light Latin beat from Whitfield, and a guitar melody that has some attractive pauses on the way with recurring licks that become familiar. Fleming is off on a bass solo that reaches up into the high register. Let's jump back in midway on Pilon's solo to hear some of his improvisations. Back to the melody with that familiar lick to the end. And track 6, Tulsa. This is a cool tune with a little western tinge that evokes an open, lonely road. There's a 16-measure intro with a neat repeating bass figure. The guitar melody is in an AAB shape. The final section has an extra 4 measures that holds on, and then 4 measures of the intro idea get it going around again. Goes around again from there, and then Pilon is off on improvisations. There's a lot of rhythmic fun in his ideas on this tune. Let's check out a little bit more. Back to a round of the melody from there, but then Fleming introduces a new section for the ending that builds up with Whitfield working feverishly around the drum kit. Track 7, What's in the Way is the Way. A kind of Zen-like title, a final quintet tune here. It has kind of a loping waltz feel. There's a 16-measure intro that stays in time with a held note ending. Stephen Art gets the spotlight for the melody that works down into the lower register of the trumpet and brings in the vibes on top. It keeps developing with new ideas as it goes. Romain and Estevanar exchange sections of improvised ideas on this one as well. Let's hear some of their playing. They continue on, connecting back to a final melody section. And the recording ends up with a tune called Now It Begins. This has kind of a sparse guitar melody with lots of gaps for Whitfield to fill out on the drums. It works to a final section of pushing figures with bass before Pilon is off improvising over Le Fleming's chugging bass walk. Let's come back to hear some more of his lines. I like this section where there's some cool syncing up on rhythmic action. Around. It ends up with the rhythmic pulsing bass section that we heard at the end of the melody. And that's the recording. Pilon has a warm guitar tone, but he adapts his sound to his expression, sometimes fluid, sometimes atmospheric, and his rhythmic ideas in lines often catch my ears. His original compositions are unique with varied structures and unexpected turns. I especially liked Tulsa. The trio tunes have a lot of tight interplay, and I enjoyed the arranging of the melody lines on the quintet tunes with Vallet's vibes and Estevanar's trumpet. They both get a few solo spots and play off from each other's energy. Le Fleming's bass playing is creative with changing rhythmic patterns in different sections of tunes, and although he doesn't get any solos on the recording, Whitfield adds a lot of excitement with fills and tight grooves that keep the energy high throughout.
Yeah, I like the compositions on this album too. I liked the chords and melody shape and how it all fit together. It just had a real, and there's a certain Frenchness to it too, the way it fit together. Things just sort of came together in unexpected ways. Pilon has a good ear for appealing themes in his compositions that satisfy the listener aesthetically as well as emotionally. Jean-Paul Estevianard brings a lot of class via his tone to his playing on the album, and of course I liked Pilon's tone and intriguing phrases throughout the album. All the approaches taken by the band are a little different than you'd expect, and the record kept my attention throughout. There's a lot of subtlety in the compositions and the playing, and this is really what I go for when I'm listening to music. I like things to sort of surprise me, but in small ways. It rather worked on me as I listened to it, and I think there's a lot more to it than I can articulate at the moment, so I'm going to have to get this one and listen to it again and again.
Yeah, it has a really nice atmosphere for the whole recording, too. And a lot of that is enhanced by the sound quality. It's kind of deep and a little bit reverby, too.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned the drummer. I really liked his kind of busy but light drumming throughout to Mark Whitfield Jr., you know?
Yeah.
It was kind of hypnotic in a way, or kind of, intriguing. I don't know how to describe it, but it all drew me in. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, really nice playing throughout this recording. All right, let's go over to Spain next for Smack Dab. And their recording, Pulse. This is on the Fresh Sound New Talent label from Spain. Came out April 11th and also features one of our favorite pianists, David Kikoski.
Yeah.
The notes say, for this occasion, Smack Dab is honored by the outstanding pianist David Kikoski's contribution. All compositions and arrangements were brought to life right on the studio with no prior run-through. From what I gather from reading some Spanish jazz press, Smack Dab formed in 2015, and they seem to have at least 2 previous recordings, and Smack Dab are Oriol Valles on trumpet, and he studied at the Manhattan School of Music, Luc Casares on tenor sax, Pau Sala on bass, Juan Casares on drums, he's the brother of Luc, and David Kikoski as the special guest on piano. We've got a variety of original compositions by the band members and some arrangements of standards that I'll point out as we go along. This was recorded at Vertigo Studios in Spain in August of 2023. The sound engineer Ferran Donatelli, mixed by Jan Valles at Tasso Studio, mastered by Piero de Wachter. Track 1 is a composition by Juan Casares, the drummer, Velho Diabo. And things get off to a tight and tricky start with this tune. There's an 8-measure intro with an even hi-hat subdivision and a cool syncopated bass and piano groove. The horns come in with a tricky and sometimes angular melody that has unexpected harmonies on the way. It sounds like 24 measures around twice with a different ending the second time, and I like how it breaks into swing for a few bars. Let's check this out. Dave Kikoski is up first for a solo, so let's come right back in and check out some of his playing. As always, he's bursting with ideas and really chaining the ideas together. Vias follows from there with a trumpet solo. I like the rhythmic sense in his lines, and Casares is next on tenor sax, and he has a very distinctive tone, which we'll hear some of in a little while. The intro idea brings it into a final round of the melody to finish it up. Track 2, Summer League. This is by Luc Casares. A medium swing feel here. The horn melody is in an AABA construction with 16 measure sections. In the A sections, 8 measures of staccato hits, then turn to legato lines. It's fun and cute, with tasty little fills from Juan Casares on the drums. The horn lines in the B section swing well with nice harmonies too. The long structure takes a while to play out, but let's hear it get started. Let's hear some of Casares' solo on his own composition. Pleasing tone with butterfly-like phrases that changed in direction quickly. Vias gets a trumpet solo with lots of seamless double-time phrases, nice articulation, and some bluesy hints, and Kikoski's solo has a happy bounce and a lot of magic. I wish we could hear samples of all the solos on this track, because I like them all. He plays on with the horns coming in on lines that work to a last A section of the melody, with final phrase repeats to wrap things up. Track 3, Pulse, the title track by trumpeter Audio Vias. This is a really cool hard bop tune with a 40-measure minor melody. From the composition and Vias' solo, you can tell that he's taken all of his Freddie Hubbard vitamins over the years. Let's hear this get going. I say we just keep on listening to this solo. Yeah, really hot, exciting playing, and Kikoski is off from there, keeping up the intensity, and Casares gets a sax solo too with some edgy tone. Juan Casares has been really pushing the solos along with intense drum work, and he gets a solo as well before the horns are back with the melody that gets an exciting finish and a high note from Valles. Track 4, All the Way, by Jimmy Van Heusen, and this is arranged by Luc Casares. This was written for the 1957 motion picture The Joker is Wild, and it was recorded in the same year by Frank Sinatra, with orchestra conducted by Nelson Riddle, and it got an Academy Award in 1957. So it's a jazz standard now, and Casares' arrangement makes it a vehicle for Valles' trumpet, starting out with just Kikoski's backing. Remember the Sammy Kahn lyrics for this tune: when somebody loves you, it's no good unless he loves you all the way. Let's hear Valles sing it out on the trumpet. Luc Casares takes over for a section, and then they finish the melody together gently. Kikoski gets to show off his gentler side on his solo on this tune. Let's hear how he finishes up his solo. Yeah, I like that light little tremolo and the light high register touch. Valles is back for improvisations with some playful half-valve touches, and he connects it back to the melody with help from Casares' sax and a pretty rubato trumpet ending. Track 5 gets the funny title award, Gangster Lobster. This is from Oriol Valles. This is a neat minor tune with playful slinky horn lines. It's based around a 12-bar minor blues, but the second time around it's got an extended 4-measure tag ending. Let's check it out. Valles is up first for a solo with a really nice tone. The solos follow the 12-bar blues form. Kossatos' sax solo has a relaxed feel, even through double-time lines with some sassy bluesy phrases mixed in, and Kikoski has a fine bluesy piano solo after that. Let's check out Sala's bass solo on this one. And back to the melody that gets a neat little ending to finish things up. Track 6, Kiribati and Tokelau. If you're saying, what is that? Look on the world map into Micronesia, these little islands. If you want to really get away from it all, you'll be isolated out there. This is a fun, jittery and bluesy waltz with a 32-measure melody that has some fun diversions. Kikoski is soon off on a funky piano solo that does some neat harmonic explorations. Really nice groove going on there. Valles and Luke Kossatos both get fun solos on this one as well. Track 7, the song is You, Jerome Kern's tune, arranged here by Valles. It's from the Broadway musical Music in the Air way back in 1932. This is a standard we've heard a million times, but Valles' arrangement makes it fresh and fun, switching between Latin and swing feels with nicely harmonized horn lines, and Kossatos taking a section solo on sax. Just getting started on the trumpet solo there. Let's pop back in and hear some more of his playing. Casadas is next on sax, and Kikoski has an exciting solo too. The ending is fun with some extension for Juan Casadas to work up some excitement on the drums. And the recording ends up with KD's Motion, a Kenny Durham tune from his 1955 Afro-Cuban album. This is like Durham's original version, but with a bit more relaxed groove. Now, all the solos here are really fun, from Luke Casares, Valles, Kikoski, and Sala. Valles especially has a puckish trumpet solo with a series of Armstrong-like falling notes, but for balance, let's continue on here and hear this solo from Luke Casares. Well, this was a great little find of jazz in the post-bop tradition from some hot young Spanish musicians on the Fresh Sound label. The original compositions recall favorites from the 60s jazz era, but with fresh new twists that are also applied to the two standards, and a fun one from Kenny Durham finishes things up. Exciting solos all around, especially from Oriol Valles' trumpet, which really impressed me throughout the recording, and the always fabulous David Kikoski for classy backing and great solos as well. This recording is full of energetic jazz that you're guaranteed to enjoy.
Yeah, this album felt really good and had some inventive playing, like you said, too. The feel-good part comes from the natural swing of the band and from Kikoski's feel and phrasing as well. You mentioned Oriol Valles, and I liked him, too. He had a strong tone. He likes to play out, he's always solid. He comes in hot and strong. And he goes for high notes often, and they come out ringing. I thought he was particularly strong in The Song Is You, where he goes off on a long, inventive solo. Meanwhile, Luke Casares acts as a fine foil with his more diffuse tone and softer attacks. I kind of like that sort of hot and cold quality they had.
Yeah, nice balancing, yeah.
He shows great agility in his solos, too. And Kikoski is, of course, outstanding on this album. He always is. You never really hear him on an album where he's just kind of not,
Sounds like he just showed up for the studio that day and played brilliantly on everything.
Yeah, he
amazing.
just has like loads of ideas, like this huge, jazz kind of riff vocabulary that he can draw on. He was particularly great on tracks 2 and 3, I thought. He's always inventive. I loved his accompaniment under the trumpet solo on KD's Motion at the end, as well as his bluesy solo in that track too. There's a lot to tune into here, a lot of intricate playing in all the solos, as well as a great swinging feel throughout. I like this on a lot of levels, and it de-stressed me too, because I heard it on Tuesday when I was really losing my mind back at work. So it was just perfect. That just made me like it even more. So I'm going to have to add this one to the collection too.
Really nice recording. All right, one more, and that's going to be Trumpet 2 from down under in Australia, Lachlan McKenzie, Departures on ABC Jazz, came out April 11th. McKenzie has a Bachelor of Music in Jazz Performance from Brisbane's Jazz Music Institute and a Masters of Music degree from the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. This is his second recording, with all original compositions here written over a 7-year period, the notes say. Lachlan McKenzie on trumpet, Lachie Hamilton on tenor saxophone, Wilbur Witta on piano, Jacob Graham on bass, and George Greenhill on drums. As I mentioned, all compositions here by Lachlan McKenzie, except for track 5, which is kind of an intro. That's by Wilbur Witta. This was recorded July 1st, 2024 at Rankum Street Studios, Botany. Engineered and mixed by Brent Clark, mastered by Kathy Naunton. And the recording is going to get started with the title track Departures. The staccato horn hits on the melody give the impression of being at a halftime tempo, but then you feel the meter when the clicky drums and bass line get moving. The first section is 8 measures, and the next sections start with the same idea, but have lines extending for another 4 measures. Then there's a drum break and a final weaving horn line section. The horns and the even beat evoke Kenny Durham's Blue Bossa a bit, I thought. Hamilton is up first for a solo with relaxed, slinking lines. Graham's bass pulses make a great groove. A drum break and the first melody lick make a cool transition to McKenzie's trumpet solo that starts with some half-valve sassiness. Let's check out some of that. His meandering, exploratory lines. A similar transition sets up Witta for a piano solo who mixes outside wandering with funky bluesy ideas, and the melody returns, ending with a nice drum build-up from Greenhill. Track 2, Sentimental Sundays. Witta makes a bouncy solo piano opening for this tune. The 32-measure horn melody has a carefree, swinging nature that has a bit of sentimentality to it. Let's hear it. McKenzie's off for a solo first. Swinging melodic ideas and a good sense of space between his phrases. There's a little turnaround at the end of his melody there that he emphasizes. It reminds me of something from a Tad Dameron tune. Hamilton follows on sax, smooth tone and phrasing in his playing. Let's check out some of his solo from midway through. Has a go next on piano. Then there's some new bouncy horn lines that trade eighths with improvised bass from Graham into a longer bass solo. Things end up with the second half of the horn melody. It's a nice way to keep things fresh working through the structure of the tune. Track 3 is Undercooked. This tune creates excitement with two contrasting sections. The first 16-measure section has syncopated chord figures in the piano. Then the horns are in on some topsy-turvy agile phrases in a shorter 8-measure section. That pattern repeats with the horns joining in on the syncopated lines too, and it has one final section of the longer syncopated section. Let's hear it. Hamilton's off on a sax solo from there. Let's hear McKenzie's solo on this one. I'll play the whole thing. His playing reminds me of the way Kenny Durham could play softly with distinct articulation, and I also like the musical phrasing even at this fast tempo. horns trade eights with Greeno, who shows a lot of finesse around the drum kit, and then the horns add punctuated hits following the syncopated pattern from the beginning as a backing, to a shortened final melody section with a round of the topsy-turvy section. Track 4, Seclusion Delusion. This is an interesting composition. Waves of dreamy piano congeal into an 8-measure intro. The horn melody has interesting bass and left-hand piano lines below it and keeps evolving until it dissolves into piano waves again. Tempo will get set again for a soft start to a solo from McKenzie. He gets a really long time to build up his solo with a good arc. Let's check out the final section. Witta's piano solo is also engaging on this tune. The ending melody section works to a final flourish with Greeno's drums. Track 5, Wilbur's Creation. This is a short 2-minute track or so by Wilbur Witta. It has a music box-like beginning and gets some rhythmic chordal movement to a dreamier ending that connects to the next track. I can't really capture the essence by chopping up half of it into a sample, so I'll leave you to check it out. But it leads into track 6, Isolation Creation, and Witta works a solo piano opening to this ballad with an upward flourish of notes. McKenzie's tone is warm and very delicate, and the slow tempo will just let us get to hear the beginning of the tune. McKenzie's solo on this tune keeps the warm and intimate character, sometimes at a whisper of a volume. Hamilton matches the mood with the soft sax solo with appealing tone, and Graham has a warm and melodic bass solo here as well. Let's hear some of his playing. melody from there. The final soft horn lines are very nice indeed. Track 7, Scaphoid, which I guess is one of the carpal bones of the wrist. There's an ominous open fifth 16-measure rhythm section intro. An exciting horn melody has a 16-measure section breaking into swing midway. It sounds like it's going to repeat in the next 14-measure section, but it returns to the ominous sounds with nice flourishes from Witte. The sections go around again, but this time the horns build harmonic tension coming out of it. Let's check it out. Hamilton is up first for an exciting solo, starting with modal explorations. McKenzie follows in like fashion. Let's check out Witte's playing on this one. Those thundering left-hand chords and that frenzy of notes, it ends up with one time through the two melody sections. And the recording finishes up with track 8, East Brisbane Blues. This has a long melody with dynamic contrast that builds up tension with riffy horn lines. Let's check it out. The solos follow a 12-bar blues pattern, and McKenzie is up first. Hamilton and Witte both get distinctive solos too. Let's check out Graham and Greenhill trading some drum and bass choruses on this one. they go on, getting into shorter phrase exchanges, and the tune ends up with a final shorter melody section. And that wraps it up. Lachlan McKenzie makes a fine showing as a trumpeter and composer on Departures. His playing style is appealing, especially when he's soft and warmly lyrical in a Kenny Durham or Chet Baker kind of way. His solo phrasing has a mature style with space and development. I enjoyed his playing a lot. McKenzie's original compositions have a lot of variety in moods and grooves, and the structures are unique, giving you little surprises throughout. The program has a nice mix of traditional swinging melodies, modern modal ideas, blues, and ballad material. Hamilton has a fine tenor sound, and I like how each of his sax solos was unique, matching the mood of the tune. Witta has exciting solos and interesting backing ideas on the piano that catch your ear throughout the recording, and Graham and Greeno round out a great rhythm section and mix up fun solo ideas as we heard in the last sample. I'll be really looking forward to hearing more from McKenzie in the future.
Yeah, this was a nice discovery. This album came across as a bit of a visit to earlier times. I guess they all do in a way, but this one really, it had like a really specific quality to it. And not just because of the swinging tunes. The brass, particularly Lachie Hamilton on tenor sax, had a glow to his tone which was noticeable on Isolation Creation. And it had me thinking of like early 20th century ballrooms, like songs like Moon Glow and, way back in the day in the 40s. I like all the energy provided by the rhythm section, and there's a genuine enthusiasm in the playing that's really infectious and a real sense of teamwork, like these guys have been playing together for some time and really enjoy each other's company. I got that sort of sense from them. The compositions are all inviting, and there were some creative structures and turns of phrase in solos and leading into solos. I was glad to hear this. It's sort of a tradition with a twist, I guess.
Yeah, and I like his trumpet style, especially we heard the trumpet on the earlier album. That was more sort of outwardly expressive and, dynamic trumpet that we like to hear a lot. But I like to hear introspective trumpet as well sometimes. And I thought he creates a real intimate sense, and especially with nice phrasing. So
hey, you want all the moods, I think classical music does that to you. Just, you hear Baroque music, they want the emotions,
Yeah. So, yeah, really nice trumpet playing, and I'm always looking for more jazz from Australia, so I was happy to find this recording.
Yeah, why not? Jazz from everywhere.
That's going to wrap up episode 209, and we've got a whole menu set up for episode 210. What do we have for classical music next week, Mike?
Okay, well, in Baroque, I'm really going Scandinavian next week, I think. First of all, we have a recording of, in Baroque, we have a recording called Northern Light. Echoes from 17th century Scandinavia. Boy, there's a repertoire nobody knows. But actually, that repertoire includes composers that were in the Hanseatic League, so, North Germany as well as Sweden in this case. This is by Lucille Richardot and Ensemble Correspondant Sébastien Dausset, director. They did another record that I really liked called Perpetual Night back in, I think that was 2018. But long before we started doing the podcast, so I'm glad to see them together again. I'm feeling really flutey these days, I think, so I've got another Nordic thing. This is more flute. Nordic Treasures from the Ars Production label. This is with Katharina Sames, I guess, on flute, and Mari Inoue on piano. We have a Japanese pianist there. And then American composer Michael Dougherty's going to round things off with 3 orchestral works, which I'll talk about when we get to them next week.
On the jazz side, we're going to start out with a guitar-led recording, James Zito with Zito's Jump. And it's got some stellar sidemen on there, including Joe Farnsworth. Then we're going to go over to the UK and hear a debut recording as a leader from Mark Millington, a saxophonist. That's called Picture This. And then we'll check out a new release on Origin's OA2 label, the Medlar Sextet's River Paths. So all fresh recordings there. Looking forward to checking those out. We'll have a playlist up shortly after this episode is published on Deezer, and I'll put a link to it from our Facebook page as well. Thanks as always to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. I'm just ready to start listening for next week, Mike.
Me too.
So That wraps everything up here. Have a good week. Keep listening, and we'll see you again next week for episode 210.